Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Top of Off podcast. And yes, we have reached 10 episodes. We actually have done that.
We've actually managed it.
So we are now on double figures, 10 not out so far.
Better than Joe Denley ever did.
Exactly. And we are going to be looking today at day 5, so the final day of the second test between England and the West Indies, which was played at Old Trafford. We're going to look at that, and we're also going to give a bit of time to look at going forward, looking ahead to the next test, and then the series against Pakistan, and the rest of the summer, really. So yeah, this is going to be a very sort of varied episode with a lot of different parts to it, but we hope you enjoy it. Jake will start us off with the overview of the day. That's it.
Yes, I will. So, day 5 began poised on a knife edge with England into bat. They had lost both Buttler and Crawley the night before. Obviously, Stokes and Buttler opening the batting in an attempt to get quick runs. So, they began with Stokes and Root at the crease. The two formed a solid partnership with pretty defined roles. Joe Root was just knocking it around, trying to get the singles, get Stokes back on strike, eventually being run out by Alzari Joseph on 22 off 58, sacrificing his own wicket just to get Ben Stokes back on strike, which brought Ollie Pope to the crease. And that's how it stayed, really, that only 19 overs were bowled. Ben Stokes smashed several boundaries, 4 fours, 3 sixes with a strike rate of 136 to finish with 78 off 57 balls. And Ollie Pope stayed in well, also with a strike rate of 171, making 12 off his 7. Stokes particularly impressed with some big shots down the ground and a pretty outrageous 4. The latest of late cuts, just almost an edge, kind of run down to third man, beautifully played for 4, which led to the declaration from Joe Root on 129 for 3, setting the West Indies a target of, I believe, 311.
312.
BBC Sport is not telling me, but it was 311, I believe, was the target for the West Indies. So that's how the West Indies innings began. They needed 311 runs or to bat out the remaining 85 overs, whereas England needed 10 wickets. So Craig Brathwaite and John Campbell opened for the West Indies as usual. Campbell was the first to go with his wicket falling after just 5 balls, being edged behind to Buttler off Broad's bowling. Broad, very cunning bowling, hung one up there, got Campbell very elegantly drove him for 4, then Broad put it on exactly the same spot, just swung it in instead of out. Campbell nicked off, and after a very good and very late review from Joe Root, he was judged to have edged the ball to the keeper. Craig Brathwaite, the key wicket, the man who can stick around for a while, was the next to go after 7 overs, 7.6 overs. There was either a wide or a no ball in the over, leaving the West Indies 19 for 2 as he was bowled LBW by Wokes on 12. Then England were held up a little bit by the partnership of Shai Hope and Shamar Brooks. Only for 1 over, though, actually. I've got that completely wrong. Only for 1 over were they held up until Shai Hope was bowled by Broad. Absolute beauty of a ball, nipping back in from outside the line of off stump and taking, in a clear plug for our podcast, Top of Off, absolutely smashed. Which brought Roston Chase to the crease. Sadly for the West Indies, only another 6 or so overs were lasted, with Roston Chase getting out for 6 off 19 balls, trapped LBW by Broad, leaving the West Indies 37 for 4 going into lunch. It was at this point that England's rampant bowling attack was held up by the partnership of Brooks and Blackwood. A further 38 overs going past before with the two building nicely before Blackwood, having made 55, was caught by Butler off an aggressive delivery from Stokes. Stokes again with the key wicket. Dowrich then, very unfortunately, in the next over, got his pair, duck in both innings, being trapped in front by Wokes off 5 balls for naught. The danger man and the man who was really holding them up, Shamar Brooks, was the next to go 12 overs later, on 161 for 7, leaving the West Indies. Brooks being trapped in front again by Sam Curran, 62 runs off 136 balls. The key statistic there being 207 minutes taken up by him. However, from there, it was relatively quick progress for England. A absolute ripper of a ball from Dom Bess, finally bowling from the right end, removed Jason Holder through the gate, crashing middle stump after 62.5 overs. Alzari Joseph was the next to go. He got a little too aggressive with his shot making and was caught by Bess in the gully off Stokes. And then finally, off Bess's bowling, an outrageous catch from Ollie Pope at short leg removed Kemar Roach, leaving the West Indies 198 all out after 70 overs, having not lasted the 85 overs they needed to. And so England won this nail-biting test match by 113 runs. Actually quite a dominant display from England in the end, although it wasn't always seeming like it would be that way.
It's been another very tense, very good game of cricket from both teams in this series. So that's 2 really good tests we've had in this series so far. And it's really, more than anything, it's been a very good representation of Test cricket as a format, and it's really shown just how good Test matches can be. You know, if everything goes the right way, if the pieces fall in the right way to make it just tense enough, they can be really good games, and they can be really exciting. So that was brilliant. And it did
right down to the last hour as well. It was the stroke of the last hour that Bess removed Roach for the final wicket, even though it seemed a little inevitable by then that the West Indies weren't going to make it. The fact that it got down to the final hour of the 5th day, echoes of Monty and Jimmy Anderson at Cardiff.
Yeah.
You thought, they might just hold them up. The pitch was looking a bit tricky, but you know, it was a nail-biting finish actually, and it was really a very good bowling performance from England.
Oh, it was a very good game, especially from England. So we usually start these episodes with a stat, and all of the usual stats, you know, in terms of how dominant England were or just how good England were. Ben Stokes set the record for, well, firstly on day 2, Ben Stokes made the slowest 100 of his career, and then on day 5, Ben Stokes set the record for the fastest 50 by an England opener ever.
On his debut opening, I believe, first ever time he opened the batting.
First time he opened
in a test match.
It was actually Alistair Cook who he took that record from.
I think what we're saying here is that Ben Stokes is a better opener than Alistair Cook. Discuss.
Yeah, there you go. That's the most controversial thing it's not going to even be the most controversial thing we'll ever say. But in all seriousness, what it shows is just how complete of a player Ben Stokes is and has become, because not only can he bat restrained, and he not only can he bat so that he stays in and scores slowly, but he can also then take the game to another team and bat aggressively and really take the shackles off if he needs to. So it's really and both of those aspects of Ben Stokes have been shown in this test. So that stat of this was, he set the record for the fastest 50 by an England opener, is one stat. But then I wanted to have a look at another stat which I found myself, which is that on the BBC Sport cricket page, on their front page, there are 14 articles on their front page. This morning, 8 of those 14 articles were about Ben Stokes. So it shows just how important he's become and just how influential he's become as well. It's brilliant.
Well, I've seen some of those 8 articles, and they have. Well, first of all, the one I was most pleased to see was the headline: Ben Stokes absolutely fine after injury worry.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
did pull up at the end of that second innings. He couldn't complete his over. We all thought, oh, has he gone a bit too far? And somehow he hasn't. I mean, God, how has he not?
yeah.
But
He's
no,
yeah,
it's Ben Stokes for president at the moment, isn't it? Because
yeah,
my God, I'm just looking at some of his numbers on the scorecard, and he was in batting for over 410 balls.
yeah.
He then bowled, if I just check, he bowled in excess of 27 overs, taking, I believe, 3 wickets if he took one in the first. Yes, 3 wickets,
Yeah,
all of which were quite key wickets. In the first, he removed Craig Brathwaite, who'd stuck around for 165 balls. And
yeah.
then in the second, he got Blackwood, who was holding England up quite mightily. So, and he's just amazing, isn't he? And he's
Yeah.
definitely the best player, all rounder, but definitely the best player in the team at the moment. He's just
Oh,
moved up
he's
past.
statistically now become the best all rounder in the world.
He's just past Jason Holder, which must feel quite nice. He's one of the BBC Sport articles. He was claimed as right up there with Botham. He's
Yeah,
definitely as good as Botham. He's fantastic. And the moment for me, which really, more than anything, showed how unbelievable a player he is, was when he bowled, got straight driven, realised that he didn't have a mid on
oh,
no,
yeah,
it was a mid off, didn't have a mid off, and so turned around. Most bowlers would just go, oh, I've just been driven for 4, hang their head. He turned around, he sprinted back to the boundary and dived and swept it back from the boundary, threw into where he just bowled from. My God, it's superhuman stuff from Ben
it's
Stokes.
amazing,
And
absolutely spectacular.
I mean, if he carries on like this, he's definitely man of the series, as we will both discuss later in our little ending segment. But I'm sure we'll both have him down as man of the day and man of the match for England. He was utterly fantastic, and we moan a little bit both on the pod and in private about how much this team relies on Ben Stokes, but how fortunate we are to have him. And
Oh yeah, yeah,
you
definitely.
know, I'll even go so far as to say, kind of at this point, that there really is no Flintoff, there is no Botham. Ben Stokes is the man when it comes to England all rounders, and I
Yeah,
think he's the
yeah.
best we've ever had.
I mean, he's definitely shown that he will go. Well, he has gone beyond Flintoff and Botham already, but he's definitely shown that when we turn around in 10 years, 5, 10 years time, you know, and look at, well, if he's not still at that point, but when we turn around at that point, you know, and think about what defines an English all-rounder, and you know just how good is that position, we will be able to see just how far ahead of everyone else Ben Stokes is and was. And I mean, it's I suppose you could say that he can't be compared to Botham or Flintoff because he's a natural continuation of the two. You know, you have Botham to start with, and then he really defined the mold for an all-rounder, and then you get to Flintoff, who redefined it again for an English all-rounder. And then I suppose Stokes is just that the next of those generational talents that come through. So I suppose that you can't really compare them because they're all continuations of each other in a series.
But he just makes it look so easy.
Yeah.
And we look at him and go, how do you do it? How can you do that? He makes it look fantastically easy, and he's doing spectacularly difficult things. Key stat for you, and because you like our stats and the stat battle, Ben Stokes also in this match became the first person in English cricketing history to score over 250 runs and take more than 2 wickets in a match.
Yeah,
He's
it's
he's
just
unbelievable. And
it's almost.
if he'd been allowed to carry on, he would have had both hundreds in both innings. I have no doubt.
Oh yeah, definitely. That second innings, if there wasn't the time pressure, if it was day 4 that innings were being played on, he'd be definitely. Just because of how spectacularly he's been playing, nothing can touch him at the moment at all.
It just makes you think slightly. If he can come in with the new ball,
yeah.
as well, and do that, he's on another planet. And
Oh, he is.
and
He is. He's superhuman at this point. He's
yeah.
operating at a level that's so much higher than anyone else. It's just frankly, it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. It shouldn't.
Well, there was a BBC Sport article, one of the 8 about him, which I fully agree with the headline of. I truly agree and believe that Stokes can come through not only as the best all-rounder in the world, but as the best batsman in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think he has the potential to overtake Kohli and Smith and Williamson and Root, and I think
Yeah.
I don't know if as a batsman he's officially overtaken Root yet, but he's certainly performing better than him.
Well, his obviously his career average is about 35 or something like that, which is good, but you wouldn't say it's world beating. However, you think that Marnus Labuschagne or Steve Smith, players like that, they have averages in the 60s at this point. Since the start of last year, so since the first test against the West Indies at the start of last year in 2019, Stokes has played 13 or 14 tests, something like that. He's played a decent amount of test cricket, so a decent amount of innings, and his average since the start of 2019 is 62.4 or something like that.
Yeah, so he's right up.
He is.
He's right up there, and I have no doubt that he could topple Steve Smith.
Oh yeah,
and he could be better than him. And
I mean, it's going to be I think the battle, him versus Steve Smith in Australia next winter, is going to be a thrilling battle. It's going to be
even sooner than that, him and Kohli in January in India. Obviously, advantage Kohli because it's in India, but I think Stokes, as far as I remember, quite liked it out there as well. And
yeah,
I think that'll be a fantastic thing to watch.
That's going to be good.
Yeah, and it'll just be good as the little fanboys that we are to see Virat Kohli again, because we love a bit of Kohli. I don't like to admit something this raunchy on camera, but we do sit and just watch videos of Virat Kohli cover driving occasionally, and we make some noises, don't we?
We have been known to do this actually. Oh, yeah.
So that that'll be nice as well. But
no, it's going to be.
Maybe we should very swiftly move on from that.
We should. Let's move on. Let's move on to England won. As we know, and they won very convincingly in the end, and really squared the series up. The third test is going to be really interesting. So just before we move on to looking ahead, what did England do well to win, and where did the West Indies slip up?
The West Indies, I think. I don't know if the West Indies did much wrong. I think there were times in the second innings where their batsmen maybe had wishful thinking about possibly winning the game, putting the series to bed. They seemed a little bit aggressive. They went. Campbell's an example of this. Big booming drive before, another one on the same spot, thinks he can do it again. Leave it. It's outside the off stump. Just leave it. They were never going to win that game realistically in the time that they had. So what they needed to do was kind of park the bus in soccer terms and completely shut down. Big blockathon.
Yeah.
It would have been dull to watch, but I think that's the best chance they had, and that would have retained them the Wisden Trophy.
Yeah.
However, England won the game. The West Indies didn't lose it. The West Indies played very well, actually, and pretty composed. Campbell dropping Stokes on 30 was a huge moment because I don't think anyone else could have could have done what Stokes did and put England in the commanding position as quickly as he did. So that's big. But other than that, the West Indies didn't make a lot of mistakes. It was a fantastic bowling attack, fantastic bowling performance by them. Stuart Broad, he seems quite annoyed at having been left out of the last test. So he decided to come in and just destroy, which he did quite effectively. Chris Wokes, who's shockingly underrated because of his performances abroad, came in with 2 wickets, economy rate of 2.12, only bested by Broad in the wickets column and Stokes in the economy column. So he played really well, other than Root, who bowled 1 over for naught, but we don't care.
I do like it when Joe Root starts bowling.
He just looks so uncomfortable. Although he has taken wickets, he's got Test wickets.
He took Steve Smith's wicket back in the last Ashes series in Australia.
But it was just a really fantastic performance all round, with possibly the exception of Dom Bess, but that was because he was misused a bit, and we'll get onto that because I'm quite annoyed about it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
As an off spinner, I get quite annoyed about these things.
That's something we've got to address at some point. Yeah,
but it was just really well bowled from England. They played well. They got the key wickets at the key times. Brathwaite going early, he could have held them up for ages.
Yeah.
Other than that, Brooks and Blackwood were the most likely people to hold them up based on form, and they did. But then the 2 golden arms of England, Sam Curran and Ben Stokes, got involved, and they just have a knack for taking wickets, and they took the big ones at the right times.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on.
Sorry, carry on.
I just want to touch on Sam Curran now that you've mentioned him, because, I mean, rightly so, a lot of the spotlight from this test is going to be on Ben Stokes because of what he did. But we have to remember that Sam Curran was very instrumental in taking a few wickets as well. And there were a few important wickets. And he's one of those players who sometimes flies under the radar a bit, but he does make things happen, and he can get. He can turn a match around, and he can sort of start things up if they've stalled or stopped a bit, and it showed, because some of his bowling with a ball that was rapidly getting very old and rapidly losing its shape and everything like that. His bowling was really good and did take wickets. So we have to give a mention to Sam Curran because he did make things happen.
We just have to keep an eye in terms of where he goes from here on the weather forecast, because we've seen on this Old Trafford pitch when the West Indies had in their first bowling innings, when they bowled with overcast conditions, the ball moved for 80 overs. But once the sun came out in England's bowling innings, particularly the second innings, as soon as the sun came out, pitch and ball flat and dead, nothing in it. And Sam Curran is a man who performs best when there is a lot of swing in the air.
He's a very he's a bowler that's suited very much to English conditions, really.
Yeah, same with Wokes. He and Wokes are very similar, and that's why it's great that we've got such depth, because if we didn't have that depth, we'd be relying on him and Wokes to back up Anderson and Broad in Australia, and they're just not suited to those conditions.
Yeah.
Curran, he likes to push it across. Then he got that big in swinger, Mitchell Stark style, but not quite as fast, obviously. Being he's a good bowler, but if the ball's not doing much, which it may not in the next test, which is why, spoiler alert, he's not in my team for the next test.
Ooh.
Not that I don't think he deserves a place, because he's a fantastic bowler, but he there's such strength in depth now. It's hard to get in that team.
Yeah, no, for definite. Okay, brilliant. I would say I'd just add to this. Obviously, we've spoken about Sam Curran, but the West Indies as well. I just want to say they didn't play objectively poorly, but compared to the standards they were at in the last test, they weren't as good. They definitely weren't as good. And I think going forward, they just need to take heart from the fact that they played well in the last test. They won the last test, so they can do that again. And They just have to chalk this up to the fact that they were tired. And also, I think this is the most important thing, is that they had this sort of preoccupation with winning the series, and doing that by winning the test. And had they just focused on just getting through the test and drawing the test when it became apparent that they wouldn't have won, I think that they would have done better. So I think it was that mental thing as well, that precipice of we're on the verge of winning our first series in 30 years in England. I think that probably ramped up the nerves more than it had any right to. And so I think for the next test, obviously it's going to be harder for the next test because it's a decider, but they just need to control those nerves, and they just need to make sure that they don't get too put off by that fact and by that thought.
Yeah, I think actually their batting improved. Maybe not entirely numerically. Brathwaite did well, but in the second innings when he needed to, he didn't quite stay in as long as he usually does, etc., etc. But actually, the overall solidity of their batting lineup improved, and with a few tweaks, which you will see in my prediction of a West Indies team for next time. Well, it's not a prediction; it's a sort of fantasy booking, but yeah, with a few tweaks, it could be even stronger. Yeah. But the problem was their bowling wasn't on the level it was in the last test, and that was their ace card, their strong suit was their bowling, and it particularly, well, Shannon Gabriel kind of epitomised this, but he works as an analogy for the entire bowling attack. They looked tireder, they looked stiffer, they looked less accurate, little slower, and just in general, I think they didn't bowl as well as they needed to, and that's what lost them the game ultimately, as well as all the good things that England did.
Yeah. No, for sure. I agree with you there, and I think that for a test team that is so lauded for its for its bowling attack, and especially its pace bowling attack, it was just they had a rare off day, and probably an understandable off day as well, given the lengths that they've gone without high level cricket, and then playing 2 test matches of the highest level back to back. You could probably excuse them for this game, or if not excuse them, you could probably understand why it happened. And I think that's one thing, is not to, especially for the West Indies team, it's not panic stations at this point, and not to jump to conclusions. This is still a very, very good side. It was just the circumstances, I think, and they did play a big part in that. Okay.
Before we move on, can we talk about Dom Bess a little bit? Because it's slightly
I was going to bring this up in the next segment, actually, that we were going to do.
It slightly annoyed me how he was used, because effectively, so for those of who don't know, the 2 ends at Old Trafford are the James Anderson end and the Brian Statham end. And from the James Anderson end, so named after Jimmy Anderson, it generally works very well for him, because the breeze blows across that the pitch. I think the pitch is north to south, isn't it? Yeah. So the breeze comes from the east across that pitch. That's it for Jimmy Anderson. I don't know which way it comes across. The breeze comes across the pitch, taking the ball away from a right-hander from the Jimmy Anderson end. So obviously that's the end a lot of the seamers wanted to bowl from, but that is the end Dom Bess should have been bowling from.
Yeah.
And he didn't get that chance because he was stuck on the other end from all the seamers, except Sam Curran, who obviously wants to bowl with the wind taking the ball back into the right-hander for his in-swinger. So Dom Bess and Sam Curran ended up bowling at the same end, which was completely counterproductive, because you want the left-hander's the left arm seamer's foot marks for the right arm off spinner outside the right-handed batsman's off stump. So them bowling from the same end was completely counterproductive. Also, the breeze was working against Bess, because he wants the ball to drift away from a right-hander and spin back in. Obviously, it was drifting in and then spinning in, meaning a lot went down the leg side.
Yeah.
Yes, his length was inconsistent, but I think he was battling against his circumstance. And my evidence for this is that in the final throws of the game, they stuck him on at the Jimmy Anderson end, and he took 2 wickets, including the key one of Jason Holder, with an absolute beauty.
Yeah.
And what annoyed me about this is that Dom Bess is a young bowler. he's relatively inexperienced. And I understand that the senior bowler will get his choice of ends, and Stuart Broad and Chris Wokes, they did. Well, Chris Wokes not always, because Stuart Broad did, but Stuart Broad got his choice of ends, and he wanted to go from the Anderson end. Irritatingly, I think Broad is good enough to bowl from the other end, and I think he would have got wickets from the other end, and he's very capable. And when you have a young spinner like Best, when spin hasn't always been prevalent in this team, and we need to build that up next, put him on for a good few overs when Broad's resting. Put him on for a good few overs at the Jimmy Anderson, and let's see what he can do. Because
there's no reason he can't. There's no reason he can't be played from there. And because Broad isn't going to bowl every over of the game, so there will be overs where he's resting. And there,
so it just frustrated me. It just frustrated me the way he was used, and the fact that they were so kind of tactically unaware of bowling the off spinner and the left arm seamer from the same end, which really didn't help Bess. I felt very bad for him. I like him a lot. As much as we like Amar Vidi, I'm a big fan of Dom Bess, and I like the control he brings, and he didn't bring that control in this test match until the last few overs had quite a bad test match. But I don't think it was entirely his fault. Yes, he's got stuff he needs to work on, particularly consistency of length when the conditions aren't right for him.
I think that I think it's important. I think it's important to say that there was obviously the end that he bowled from was a factor in why earlier in the innings, and especially in the first innings, he didn't have much of an impact as a spinner. But we also have to say that there are some inconsistencies with his length, and they do need to be addressed, because it was quite alarming that it's 29% of his deliveries, and it was only 29% of his deliveries were on an attacking length, and that for a top level spinner, you need to be more consistent than that with your length. And if he was more consistent, he probably would take a few more wickets. But that's not to detract from the skill that he has, and also that England did mismanage him. I do agree there.
He was also the most expensive of the bowlers, which you don't want to see from your off spinner. Yeah. But I think part of that was the end he was bowling from. I mean, he bowled 15 overs, and I think he bowled his last 3 or 4 from the James Anderson end, and in those 3 or 4 overs took 2 wickets and didn't go for all that many runs. I don't have the exact statistics, but I think the fact that he only really got on that end when he was bowling in tandem with Stokes, and then Root when he finished Stokes' over after he got hurt. First of all, shows how he was mismanaged, and secondly, shows what a fantastic cricketer Ben Stokes is, because he doesn't care which end you give him. He doesn't care. And he's a senior player in that squad. He could have picked his end.
Yeah.
He didn't care. He did
what
was best for the other bowlers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I suppose it shows that there is this aspect of Ben Stokes where he is a very he's very committed to the team, and he is a very good team player, and that was shown actually. The video going around of just after the game finished, when all the players were coming off, going up to the going back into the dressing rooms, and obviously you had the reserve players there, standing in applauding everyone, and this is no slight against every other player that was on the pitch, because they were all good. They're all good, but none of them acknowledge these players and then up before the end of that line of England players, and gave them all sort of fist bumps, and that inspired. I think it was Root. I think Root would have done it anyway, but it inspired. I think Chris Wokes was behind him as well. It inspired Wokes to acknowledge these reserve players as well. So he does have a big bearing on the team culture, and he's a very good team player. And that's something to talk about with Stokes as well.
And you could see, first of all, Bess wasn't just, I had a bit of a bad day. He was hot about it. He was frustrated.
Yeah.
And you could see that in his dismissal of Jason Holder. I don't know if Holder had been chirping him or not, but he had some words for Holder which if you were a lip reader, well, I'll just say I hope none of your children are lip readers, because they weren't very pleasant words. But
Yeah,
he definitely had some words, and he was frustrated, and you could see Ben Stokes as well. Much to his credit, you
yeah,
talk about the team culture and with those reserve players, he was the first one with his arm around Best, just saying, "Look, it's all right. We've
yeah,
got you on the end you want now. You've got wickets. Great job,
yeah,
mate. Great job."
yeah.
And he, as you say, he is an enforcer on the field in terms of his bowling, but I think he's also, in a gentler sense, an enforcer of the team culture,
And
and such an important leader in that group.
I think when we talk about team culture, it's not just him as well. I think Joe Root is the same in that Root fundamentally is a very decent guy. You know, he's a really nice guy, and people who've met him in real life say that. And obviously, there was that incident when England were in the West Indies last year with Shannon Gabriel, when Shannon Gabriel said something about being gay and used it as an insult, and Root turned around and said, "Oh, actually, hang on, there's nothing wrong with being gay." You know, it showed that he is a decent guy, and so I think that this England culture is much healthier and in a much better position than it was 10 years or 15 years ago, in that it's probably not as toxic an environment, especially for young players, and that really helps with reducing the pressure on them. So that's why I think Jofra, going back to Jofra's situation, I think Jofra will have, we're getting a lot of support, not just from the management, but also from other players. And apparently, there's been stories that there's some of the players in the England camp, and I think we know who. You know, it'll be Stokes, Root, and some of the other senior players have actually volunteered when Jofra was in isolation, volunteered to go and deliver his meals to him. So that obviously they would have to keep a distance, but they could have a chat with him and stuff. So, you know, it shows that these England players and this England dressing room is a good place to be right now, which you can't and people say, and people do dismiss team culture sometimes, saying that as long as the team is winning, it doesn't really matter. But team culture does play a part. Yeah, we saw that with how Australia unravelled, and how the team culture there almost fed into their lack of success in the end, and fed into how they had to rebuild themselves because they got to such a low point. So it's really important, I think, for us to mention, and it bears a mention.
And talking about the Australian case, the way that they changed their team culture, especially with Tim Payne coming in as captain and a few of the guys changing their ways.
Do love Tim.
And also shall we call it the mellowing of David Warner from irritated man to kind of slightly calm, does TikToks with his daughter sort of thing.
We all have, especially England fans, have very strong opinions on David Warner, so we won't go there.
But he's definitely softened out. But I think you're entirely right. This England dressing room is a much better place to be, and as an England fan, it's so fantastic to hear that, given the struggles England have had with team culture and stuff in the past. Monty Panesar has been very vocal about the kind of mental health side of it. There's a fantastic documentary, I believe, on Amazon Prime, which we've both watched, called The Edge, about I think, isn't it 2013-14 England team?
Yeah, so it goes through it goes through the rebuilding of England's team for sort of 2009-2010, to make them the best team in the world. But then also talks about how they did that at the expense of what was a healthy culture, and then how things all fell apart in Australia.
And that's a fantastic documentary to watch and kind of understand the history of the England team in that sense. On the Jofra situation, I really doubt there's any focus in that group of players on the sort of the perspective that Ashley Giles gave, which is, it was dangerous and it was foolish and it could have cost us millions and it could have ruined cricket. I don't think they'll be focusing on it at all. I think the main focus will be, Jofra's made a mistake. We've all forgiven him for it, and now let's get him back in the team, keep him, keep his well-being in a good state, and as you said, with Stokes and Root and those other senior guys, just looking after the younger players, which is something we didn't see 10 years ago. There was really the opposite of that looking after of players.
Definitely.
I think that's really fantastic to hear.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Okay, so we've spoken a lot about England. We've spoken a lot about this test as well, and especially, and also we've touched on the West Indies in this test. Um, so looking ahead, what do England do with their bowling attack? Because this was the England bowling attack in this game was fantastic, and it wasn't just fantastic in that everyone else, every other bowler softened up batsmen, and then one bowler took the wickets. Every bowler chipped in. There was Stokes took three, I think. Yeah, Stokes
in the match. Yeah.
Yeah, Broad took three in the innings, and then it was figures of 2, 2, and 1 for the other bowlers. So everyone chipped in basically.
I can give you the numbers actually.
Oh
In
yeah,
the
yeah,
match,
yeah.
in the match, Broad took 6, Wokes took 5, Curran took 3, Best took 3, and Stokes took 3.
Yeah, and usually what happens is that you'll get maybe one or two senior or really good bowlers will have the majority of the wickets, and then there'll be a gap, and your spinner or your sort of secondary bowlers might take 1 or 2 wickets each. But here you've seen it's very even. Everyone has taken about the same amount of wickets, and it's very spread out. So if this bowling attack did really well in those conditions in Old Trafford, and given that the weather forecast for the next test looks like it will replicate those conditions in that it's going to be overcast and there's a threat of rain on some days as well, and also it's going to be at the same ground, so it'll be on presumably sort of the same sort of pitch. Obviously it'll be on a different pitch, but it'll be on the same sort of, it'll be prepared in the same way. What do England do with this huge depth that they have in their bowling lineup? Who gets left out, and who gets sort of who gets selected? Because there are going to be some difficult conversations to have, because someone is going to have to accept that they're not going to be playing. So who's it going to be?
Well, is this a good time to start
Yeah,
a massive argument and compare the teams which we have pre-prepared and the teams?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, I just want to make clear. I don't know if you've written it in this way, but the way I've written it is this is not the team I think will be taken into the test. This is a team I would like to see taken into the test.
So mine I did with the sort of thinking that it's both, in that this is the team I would like to see, but also I thought that this is actually the team that I think will also be selected.
Okay, I think there's a few in my team who probably won't be selected,
Yeah,
but this is the team I would very much like to see going in. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
yeah.
So, shall we do England first?
Let's do England first. Yeah.
Would you like to go first, or shall I?
I shall go. Yeah, I'll go first. So I've just got it up on my phone, what I've written out before. So my 11 for the next test would be Burns and Sibley opening. So Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Root, Stokes, Butler, Pope, Curran, Wood, Bess, and Jimmy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I disagree on a few of those and on the order of some players.
You want to use your England team out?
Yeah, so I've got Sibley and Burns opening.
Yeah.
Then Crawley at 3, Root at 4, Stokes at 5, Pope at 6 because that's where he's been playing. Then, pursuant to my previous remarks about Josh Butler on the last pod, I've included Ben Stokes because I think he's the man to go forward with. Then Bess at 8, Archer at 9, and then Broad and Anderson.
Okay, I see.
And I'll tell you for why.
Go on. Give me your reason why, and then I'll come up with my reasons why I think that maybe why I don't agree.
My reasoning is I think absolutely that, and people like Wood, Curran, Wokes, they all deserve a place in this team. But this is Anderson's home ground. He takes his wickets at 12 apiece on this ground. You can't leave him out, especially after he's been rested.
And he's also got a bloody end named after him.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got an end named after him. You have to let him bowl from that end. Secondly, Stuart Broad is in with Anderson. I considered breaking them up. I thought, as well, a lot of the bowlers, particularly in their second test, they started to look a bit more hurt and stiff.
Yeah.
I think after the first test, Stuart Broad will take a chainsaw to Chris Silverwood if he doesn't select him for this test. I think there's no way you're keeping Stuart Broad out of that team after taking 6 wickets last time. And Broad made some very good points in interviews and stuff. He said, people keep talking about me in the same bracket as Anderson, and in a way that's an honour. But also, I'm 4 years younger than Anderson. I've got more time. You don't need to think about getting rid of me just yet.
Yeah.
So as he said about Anderson between the ages of 34 and now he's 38. In a couple of weeks, he took another 100 Test wickets. Why can't Broad do
30?
So,
yeah.
I don't think you're keeping Broad out this test.
Oh no.
Archer I included ahead of Wood. I think Archer has, while Wood is faster, I think Archer has more potency and more potential on this pitch. And he didn't play the last test, obviously. If he'd played the last test, I would have had Wood in. And England just looked at sometimes, while they bowled well, at sometimes they looked like a bit of extra pace would have just unsettled the batsman on a quickening surface with a bit of uneven bounce. It would have made things a bit more difficult. You have to have a spinner in. I'm sticking with Bess. I'm confident in him. I think he should be used from the Jimmy Anderson end if the breeze is going. But I don't think if you'd asked me before he took 2 wickets in a catch, I'd have said Jack Leach probably coming in.
Yeah.
But especially when there's only one left-hander in the team, I'd say, Don Bess is still your man. Ben Stokes, I explained about Joss Butler. I think he's run out of chances, and I think Stokes is a more test-like wicket-keeper batsman.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the order is pretty much standard as England have, and for all the same reasons. Pope was looking in better touch. Stokes is obviously a superstar. Root will only get better. Crawley, he got a duck.
He proved himself.
He got a duck in an 11, but with by the way, a horrific shot from him in the second innings.
Yeah.
Really awful. In fact, it was made into a club cricket meme, just the freeze frame of his stumps getting knocked out the ground when he's done this massive drive and gone, it was an absolute beauty, mate. Nothing I could have done with it. But he's a very good player, and I think he deserves another chance. And then Burns struggling a bit for touch, but he's, again, a fantastic opener. And Sibley, obviously, with that century in the last game, you can't leave him out.
You can't drop him. Okay, so that's your England team. So I agree with you about basically the whole top 5. Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Root, and Stokes are going to be playing, and they should play because Root and Stokes are pretty Crawley, he got a duck on 11, as you said. But he did make 72 in the second innings in Southampton. So he he is looking in good touch. And also he's a valuable option if you get into a situation again where you need to up the scoring rate, because he can play fast if he needs to. Sibley, you can't leave him out. He's proved himself. He's done brilliantly in this test. And then Burns is, you say he's struggling a bit for touch, but he hasn't played all that badly this series.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd keep Burns in as well. Where I begin to diverge with you is Joss Butler. I think that Joss Butler, and I've said this before as well. I think that Joss Butler will come good in Test cricket eventually, and I think that he's got the potential. And I think that all it needs is for him to have one good innings, and he will find that form. He'll find that confidence. It's a confidence issue more than anything. It's not really about skill. He's a very skillful player. It's just about the confidence and the mental side of the game. So I would keep Butler in. I'd give him another chance. And I do have to say it would just be one more chance. He wouldn't get any more than one, but I think he deserves another chance.
Out of interest, why did you move him up the order and put Pope down?
So I moved Butler up. Just Stokes and Butler would be a great partnership to see. But also, I think that when
we saw it lasted 3 balls.
Yeah,
Butler dropped it onto his stumps.
but that was in a different circumstance. That was in a very specific circumstance.
In the circumstance made for Josh 20 over Butler. They literally played 19 overs.
I'd keep I'd move Butler. I've moved Butler up, because I want to see him play with Stokes more, but also, by the point you're 5 down, as long as England bat like they did in the last innings, by the point you're 5 down, you're looking to accelerate. And so if you can have Stokes and Butler there to handle that acceleration, then that's a very enticing prospect. And then obviously if you do lose a quick wicket, you bring Pope in and he can calm things down, but he can also then build up. He can still score as well. So that's why I moved Pope down a bit. And then obviously that's not set in stone. So if Butler and Pope were swapped around, that wouldn't matter too much, because I think they can both play very well at 6 or 7. Butler would obviously be the wicket keeper as well in that team. And then I've gone with Mark Wood as one of my pace bowlers. And the reason I've gone with Wood is because he was rested in the last game. But yes, let's not forget, he played reasonably well in Southampton, and he was rested because of injury. And I think so that's why I've chosen Wood over Archer, because I do think that if you've rested Wood and then obviously then Archer doesn't play, because of something that he's done, I think that then you can't then go back on your word and say to Mark Wood, well, sorry, you're not going to play in this test. I think you should still play him. And I think that if Old Trafford is fast, if the pitch is fast, or if it quickens towards the end of the game, as we saw it doing the last test, then Wood will be valuable there. So that's why I've gone with Mark Wood. My spinner Dom Bess, I agree with you there. And then I've just gone with Jimmy. I haven't gone with Jimmy and Broad. Jimmy obviously has to play in rest. You can't say that, because it wouldn't be we're going to rest you again. It would be you've been dropped for this test, and I don't think you can do that to England's bowler. And the reason I haven't chosen Jimmy and Broad is because the one thing that I am wary of is that you don't want to sort of play both, to keep both, to give both chances of taking as many wickets as possible before the end of their career, and neglect the younger players coming through. And, you don't want to neglect them. So that's why I've chosen Jimmy there. And the one I forgot to mention was at 8, I've chosen Sam Curran, because he makes things happen, as I've said. And that's why I've chosen him, because he makes things happen and he can bat as well. So yeah, I've chosen him over Wokes, but it's just because in those key moments, or in those moments where things are looking a bit flat, especially in the second innings, especially in the West Indies second innings, Curran actually made things happen, and he's got this knack for getting things moving again. So that's why I've chosen him. So yeah, that's my reason.
I will query Best being put below Wood in the batting order. I think he'll feel quite hard done by that.
Yeah.
Best is quite a good batsman.
Yeah, no, definitely.
West Indies team then?
Yes. So my West Indies team: Campbell, Brathwaite, Hope, Brooks, Chase, Blackwood, Dowrich, Holder, Roach, Joseph, and Cornwall.
Okay, interesting. I've got Brathwaite and Campbell opening.
Yeah.
Then I've moved Brooks up to 3.
Okay.
Blackwood to 4. Hope to 5.
Oh.
Chase at 6. Dowrich at 7. Jason Holder at 8. Rakeem Cornwall at 9. Kemar Holder at 10.
Yeah.
And Kemar Roach at 11.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty decent team as well. So I'll go through my
Explain yourself.
I shall. I've chosen sort of. I've gone down the train of thought that the West Indies won't make very wholesale changes to this team. So I think I've only actually changed one. Yeah, I've only actually made one change, and that's Gabriel for Cornwall. And the reason I've kept everyone else the same is that John Campbell, there's been a lot of talk about how maybe he should be dropped because his form has been a bit poor this series, but I think that I think he should be given another chance. Yeah, in the next test. Brathwaite, obviously, you can't drop him because he is your best opener. He's done brilliantly, so I'll keep Brathwaite there. I would still bring Hope out at. I still bring Hope out at 3, and the reason I bring him out at 3 is that he's very Joe Denley-esque in that he plays well, but he can only get to sort of 25 or so before he nicks off or something like that. But at the same time, he can bat and he can stay in for a prolonged period, and he might not make the scores to back that up, but he does a useful job there of staying in. Brooks, he's looking in fine fettle at the moment, so keep him at 4. Chase at 5, because he gives you that option. He's your team's all-rounder, or he's one of your team's all-rounders, and he did make a 50 in the last test, so why not? Why move him for the sake of moving him? Keep him at 5. Then Blackwood, he gives you that acceleration if you need, but then as we saw in Southampton, he can also bat sensibly if needed as well. He does both jobs. It gives you, much like Butler, that acceleration if you need it. Dowrich, then it will be wicketkeeper. Holder at 8 still. You can bring him in to be sort of the last of the batsmen, and then last of the batsmen proper before you get into the tail. And then kept Roach and Joseph, and then rested Shannon Gabriel because he needs a rest. He really needs a rest. He's a great bowler, and he's a very committed player, but he is injured. There is something wrong with his foot, and he needs to rest that. Otherwise, it's just not going to work for him in the next test, and it's not going to work for him going forward as well. So that's why I brought on Cornwall instead. Giving yourself then 2 spin options at Old Trafford, but also not just 2 spin options. You also got then a sort of a spinner who actually spins, and a proper spinner as it were. So that's why I call it. And also, I just want to see Rakeem Cornwall play because he's great.
We all want to see it.
But yeah, so that's the rationale behind my team. Also, just to point out, the reason I brought in Cornwall is because with Holder, Roach, and Joseph, you have enough pace there, and you have enough, you have enough straight seam. You need so there's going to be no detriment to this team for resting Gabriel and bringing in another spinner.
Yeah, I disagree slightly in a couple of places. Yeah. So I agree absolutely on the John Campbell front and the openers. Campbell definitely deserves another chance, and he's very good. I have rejigged the middle order completely because I think Shea Hope deserves better. And Shea Hope plays at 3, and he's got in this bit of chicken and egg situation where someone like yourself looks at him and goes, well, he's a bit Joe Denley. He gets to 20, 30, and he nicks off. And we can't quite understand why when he played so well. But actually, if you look at his figures, that's because at number 3, he averages something like 20. At 5, he averages 50.
Yeah.
So it's such a stark contrast for him that he deserves, as one of the more senior, well, he's pretty young, but he's been around on the short format a while and is a decently senior player in that squad. I think he deserves to be put in a place where he has the best chance of success and a spot where he averages 50. You got to put him there.
So who would you bring in at 3?
So Shamar Brooks at 3, because I think he is almost like a better Joe Denley. He will absorb those balls. He can deal with it, but also he can make big scores. He can kick on. And Sky did a fantastic piece of analysis on him. In terms of his trigger movements and batting style, he is near identical to Hashim Amla. And I'm not saying he's as good as Hashim Amla, but he has all those constituent pieces there to and he's 30-something years old. He has played a lot of domestic cricket. Yeah. I think he has the experience in the domestic game to stand up to the new-ish ball.
Yeah.
and kind of see it off and also make a good score.
Yeah.
Blackwood then at 4, coming up from 6, because I think he's shown that actually he can rein in his natural aggression. And so I think he could pretty happily, when the ball, if you're at 4, the ball's not new, it's going to be a bit old. He can bat for a bit. He can keep his aggressive side reined in for a little. And then once you get down to where he would be coming in at 6-ish, around that time, then he can start the acceleration, and he can still provide you that acceleration from a number 4 spot.
Yeah.
But when you've got Hope coming in after, averaging 50 at that spot, that looks like a deadly partnership. Dowrich seems to be the best wicketkeeper they have. He's been struggling a bit, especially with the bat. But half of that is Shannon Gabriel putting the ball any which way.
Yeah.
and a kind of inconsistent pitch.
Yeah.
He's a good player. He can play, and I think he
definitely
deserves another chance. The other reason I'm pretty happy to rejig the middle order a bit and kind of risk that is because even if you move Blackwood up from 6 to 4 and you're missing that kind of middle order acceleration, Jason Holder gives you that. He scored a double 100 at 7 or 8. He's a fantastic player. He can bat well in a test match, and not only that, if you've ever watched him on a T20 or ODI game, he can hit the ball out the stadium. Like he is a huge hitter. So
it always surprises me that Holder plays at 8. And in any other team, you think why? But then you have a look at the rest of the West Indies lineup, and you realise why. Because it's really the only place he can play without displacing someone else.
He's a quality batsman. So I think he provides that thing that Blackwood might not if he's reining in his aggression slightly.
Yeah, definitely.
Raheem Cornwall at 9 because, as you say, 2 spinners. Also, Raheem Cornwall's something like 6'5", isn't he? Something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And as Chase showed us, that slightly taller off spinner gets that uncomfortable bounce out of this surface, which I think Cornwall will really get. He gets turn. He took 10 against Afghanistan in the West Indies. He does turn it a lot more than Chase, and even Chase was getting some tweak out of the surface. But that really kind of inconsistent, uncomfortable off spinner's bounce, which catches the glove and catches the edge and the handle of the bat. Cornwall's your man for that, and as you say, Gabriel needs a rest. He does, so beaten up. I think it's his groin that's troubling him.
Yeah.
His accuracy's gone. I think I don't know if they're allowed to kind of come into the coaching environment, but next time he gets an opportunity to talk to them, and they've been analysing him on the Sky coverage, he has a wealth of resources in the form of Ian Bishop and Michael Holding, who, as former West Indians, he can go and talk to.
Yeah, and some of the best West Indian fast bowlers as well.
Some of the greatest bowlers of all time, let alone West Indians. And they were breaking down his technique and talking to him. And actually, Michael Holding is a man who, if you look at Mark Wood, his average has nearly halved in the last year because he talked to Michael Holding, and Michael Holding said, lengthen your run-up. Yeah. And so Michael Holding is clearly a man you can go and talk to about this sort of stuff, and I think Shannon Gabriel definitely needs to do that.
I'm sure there will be some discussions taking place.
One thing they did identify is he was taking his thumb off the ball, so Holding and Bishop both bowled with their thumb on the ball like that. YouTubers, you can see, listeners, you can't. But Gabriel was bowling with his thumb back off the seam, and it's impacting his accuracy. So he needs to just go away for one test, rest up, heal, talk to the coaches, and just get his run up right and his accuracy right.
Yeah.
I also rest Alzari Joseph. He was struggling with his triceps. He bowled in the second innings, but not a lot. And he's a young guy. You don't want him to get hurt. I think give him a rest. Kemar Holder, exciting new prospect, no relation to Jason. Cleaned up at the Under-19 World Cup. Inexperienced. I think he'd be making his debut, but he's fast and he's tall. He can get the bounce out the surface. he's a bit kind of like a lanky, languid Jofra Archer type
Yeah.
bowler, bit more of a slingy action. He gets a good amount of bounce and a good amount of pace through. And I think, the West Indies must realise actually now the momentum's with England. It might be kind of hard for them to win this test. Now's a good time to get Holder in, give him some experience
Yeah.
against, one of the best teams in the world, dare I say, as an England fan. Kemar Roach I'll keep, though. He didn't seem to struggle with injury
Yeah.
at all, and actually ended his wicket drought of something like 70 overs and seemed to be bowling better and better as the test matches have gone on. I think in the first test, he didn't quite get back into his rhythm, and now he's found it. So I think he's got to stay in. So yeah, that's my desired West Indies team.
I think it's a decent team. Obviously, I have some different opinions, but I think bringing in young players, I mean, need to be done at some point. I don't know if they'll do it in a deciding test, but then obviously that begs the question of where do you do it then? Because every test is important now, especially with the championship. So there aren't any tests where you can think, well, if we lose this one, it doesn't really matter. So we can bring in some of our untested players. But I would like to see, Holder, Kemar Holder, also Bonner, and some other of the exciting batsmen, De Silva as well. If they come in, it'll be really interesting. Yeah, and it'll be a nice time for them to make their debuts.
I'd be very sad to see Shannon Gabriel warming up for the next test. I think the man deserves a rest, and it would be a disservice to him from the coaching staff to force him to play.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think he'll want to play. I have no doubt he'll be itching to get out there and prove himself. But the coaches have got to step in and say, look, Shannon, you're beat up. You've got to stop and just rest for one test. You've got. I don't think they're playing actually for a while after this.
Got a bit of a break.
But then they go to Australia, I think.
Yeah,
and
that's a T20 series, not a test series.
But Shannon Gabriel can bowl there, and he'll have some fun there. And
definitely.
I think he needs to rest.
Right. So I am conscious of time, and therefore I think we shall. I think it's time for us just to do our star player moment of the day, but moment of the match and word to describe the match. So we'll just do those.
Okay.
And then we'll sign off.
My man of the match for England, I'm glad I get to go first. It's Stokes. It's got to be the man. Is it a batsman? Is it a bowler? No, it's the Superman. Like he's a superhero, and my God, how can it not be? He played so well.
Yeah.
And am I frozen? No, I haven't frozen. He won the game. He won the game for England with his all-round performance, and he is the absolute epitome of an all-rounder. And
he's really seriously good. Yeah.
Well, the ICC rankings now confirm it, but if anyone wants to be an all-rounder, he's the man to watch, and he's the ideal. So, yeah, Ben Stokes definitely. West Indies man of the match. Oh, it's actually quite tricky. It's actually quite tricky. I think. I think Shamar Brooks. I'm going to give it to.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a toss up between him and Blackwood. Oh, actually no. Sorry, I'm going to completely take that back. Special shout out to those two, Brooks and Blackwood, for batting well over both innings. But Roston Chase, another all-round performance from him. 5 wickets and a 50.
First ever,
has got
first ever West Indian to take 5 wickets and make a 50 in England ever. So yeah.
Now in the knowledge of that stat, it's got to go to Roston Chase. He did really well, and important bowling performance on a day where their bowling didn't always fire, and held up England as long as he could. Yeah. Moment of the entire match. Oh, if you'd given me moment of the day, I know what I'd pick. Okay. I'm going to cheat as usual. I've got 2. The first one is Campbell dropping Stokes. I think ultimately, if the West Indies did anything to lose the match, that was it, because that was such a kind of turning point, and Stokes went on to put England in such a commanding position from that. So yeah, him being dropped on 30. The moment I liked most in the match was the moment we talked about with Stokes earlier, where he went and saved the boundary off his own bowling. Unbelievable moment, and it just shows complete heart, complete commitment, and a level of complete invincibility from Ben Stokes. And word of the match, exciting. It was really good, poised, even down to the last hour Test cricket. It was a fantastic advertisement for the game, and I think we're really lucky as fans to have had the West Indies very, very graciously agree in these pandemic-y times to come over here and put on such a fantastic series for us. So absolute banger of a game, great series, and I am really, really looking forward to Friday when I'll be driving back from Wales, listening to Test Match Special in the car for the first day. And yeah, it looks like it's, even regardless of what happens in the last game, it's been a great series and one of the better ones I can remember in recent times, excluding Ashes series perhaps.
Definitely. Right, so my England player of the match, Ben Stokes. I mean, it has to be Ben Stokes for all the reasons that you've outlined. It has to be Stokesy. But a special mention to both Dom Sibley and also Dom Bess. And Bessie, because obviously he took his 2 wickets at the end, so he finally got his rewards. And then Dom Sibley because he's proven himself in this match. West Indies, I would say, player of the match, Roston Chase, for the stat that I outlined earlier. He's the first West Indian ever to take a 50, to make 50 and take a fifer in England. And then my moment of the match, I'm going to go with Stuart Broad's spell on day 4. Because that spell, the 3 wickets from 14 balls, that really set up the game for England, because before he came into the attack, it was looking like it was going to be a very it was going to be a draw and the West Indies were going to bat out the day and that would be it. But that didn't happen and England went on to win the game. So that was my moment of the match. And then my word to describe it would be impressive. In the impressive performance from England, but also impressive that even though there was a washed out day, it was still very exciting, and that's a testament to both teams, really. So yes, that will be.
Can I just say, I think as cricket fans, we've been so blessed over the last year.
Yeah.
Because if we look at what's happened, 6 months to a year, what's happened with particularly the England Test team and the tours they've been on, the Ashes were fascinating and gripping and tense and everything that Test cricket should be and what we wanted it to be. And when people, our girlfriends and so on, talk to us and say, "Oh, Test cricket, it's so boring," and people who like the shorter formats of the game and think Test cricket's dead. That Ashes series was exactly what Test cricket should be and why we love it and why we think it's exciting. We then went on to South Africa, fantastic, exciting, another gripping series, really even and tense again, lots of good action. And then, this West Indies series, which it seems still like anyone could win. The momentum slightly with England, but definitely anyone could win it, especially when a draw or a loss for England means the Wisden Trophy stays in the West Indies.
Yeah.
So we've been so lucky as Test cricket fans, not only to be able to enjoy all this great Test match action, but also to be able to show it to our friends, show it to people we know, and go, look, this is the stuff we love. You You call us nerds and boring, dull anoraks, but this is why we love it. And
Been
it's
brilliant.
also inspired us to do this podcast. So
Yeah,
I
it's been
think
really good. And
been a
we
fantastic
will we
summer.
will cover the short form of the game as well. And when England play ODI games, we will cover them and T20s as well. But as we said a few episodes ago, I think Test cricket is the reason that we love the game. Test cricket brings everything to the table really, and it is our favourite format of the game. And this series has really done it proud and really shown why it's so brilliant and why it survived for so long. So yeah, it's been brilliant, been really good.
Well, fantastic. Thanks very much.
And we will be back on Friday for our coverage of the next test. And this is our second test that we've covered. And we thank you all for listening. It's been really good. So we will see you on Friday. Goodbye.